For today is to pick up kind of where we left off discussing the job application materials. So last time before the break, we focused on job application materials sort of generally as a form of persuasive technical communication. And we looked a lot at resumes and talked about what kinds of information we would see in resumes and how that information might be formatted. We briefly introduced the idea of job application cover letters, but we didn't have time to get into that. So that's really where we're going to start today, is with some material that was in last week's PowerPoint that we skipped. And we're going to talk a little bit about job application cover letters, and then we'll jump over to this week's PowerPoint and talk about some other topics related to job application materials, specifically how you can use quote-unquote AI chatbots to help you with your job application materials and other things related to applying for a job. And of course, we'll talk about the job materials project, which is the next assignment coming up. I will briefly mention that I noticed that there's a slight discrepancy in like the numbering of the weeks here in some places. So like the slideshow for the stuff we're talking about this week, not the letter stuff, but the new stuff says like, it's lecture 9. And I've referred to that, I think, in the announcement as week 9, but like in Canvas, it's listed as week 10 because spring break is week 9. So I recognize there's a potential for confusion. I don't want to change the numbering of the weeks at this point because I think that would just muddy the waters further. Nonetheless, I don't think it's too hard to figure out where we are, but if you ever have any questions about what we're supposed to be doing in a given week and that's not clear for whatever reason, yeah, please let me know, and I'll make sure in the future I don't make a numbering system that doesn't line up as well. So anyway, I think that's all I needed to say about that. Okay, so job application letters. We said last week, I guess I'll go back to one of our slides. There we go. The issue, we addressed the issue of whether or not people actually need to use a cover letter. How relevant is it in 2024? That kind of thing. And for us in our instructions project, you are going to have to create a cover letter. But I would venture to say that those of you who have applied for jobs have probably had varying experiences. Many of you may have applied for jobs where a resume was all you needed, or just filling in an application online was all you needed. But others of you may have been in situations where you were expected to include a job application cover letter. So it is something that has utility, and it is something that can be a real plus, especially to job seekers who are new to the job market, where you don't have enough maybe on your resume to really speak for yourself. And the letter really gives you an opportunity to make connections between experiences you've had and the things that the employer's seeking that might not be obvious from, say, your educational or past employment experiences, if you've even had any. I know it's always a problem when you're entering the job market and you're supposed to make a resume with your job experiences and you've got no job experiences, It's the eternal problem for the new job seeker. And the letter can really help with that. So what is in the letter? And just as the resume has some sort of formulaic structures and patterns that we expect to see, the job application cover letter does too, and really for the same reasons, because it makes it easy for someone just to pick up this document and figure out what's going on. At least that's the idea. It is a place to be expressive of yourself, but it's not a place to get creative about letter format or the organization of the information, right? Because the person who's reading this letter is going to be looking for certain things in certain places, and you want to meet those expectations. So we're talking here about what we call solicited job application letters, which means letters that go along with resumes in response to a posting for some sort of job or position. An unsolicited letter, which is discussed in the textbook, is a little bit different. It's when you don't know that there's a vacancy, and you're just sort of taking your chances. That's not what we're going to be doing in the instructions project. It has a bit of a different approach. So we're just going to focus on the solicited. So that's your response to a job ad or a posting for a position or an internship or whatever it may be. So the introduction in this kind of letter is relatively concise, and it contains 3 pieces of information. It states what is the position you're applying for, because most businesses or organizations have multiple vacancies at a time. So you need to make sure you're explicit about the one that you're interested in. You indicate where you saw that position posted or where you heard about it, because sometimes you do hear about things from word of mouth. That's okay too. So wherever you learned about the position, you mention it. But the heart of the introduction is at the end of this opening paragraph, and that is a 1 to 2 sentence hook where you are indicating how you are primarily qualified for this position. And this should be something that is concrete and specific enough to convince the user to read the rest of your letter. So exactly what you'll include in that sentence or 2 sentences, you wouldn't want to go longer than that, is going to depend, right? But typical kinds of information would include, the degree you have earned or are earning, perhaps your major. That's especially important if it's an internship. If you have some experience working these kinds of jobs, you probably want to make that clear. Just a very concise summary, but the idea is catch that person's interest. This is not the place to say something like, I would really like to work for you because it would help me out and I would gain some experience. The focus of the letter has to be what you can do for them. So the focus of that hook has to be what you can bring to them. And you might have a similar hook for a lot of different positions, but you also need to make sure you're tailoring your letter to a specific position. So you kind of got to bear in mind, what is the main thing or the main things that the person is seeking or the company is seeking, so that you can tap into that. You'll notice you don't state your name in the introduction, because your name should be obvious at the bottom of the letter where you have your type name and your signature. So you don't need to have your name at the beginning. So that is a very short and sweet introductory paragraph, kind of formulaic, but the main idea is get to the point quickly and move on. The body of a job application letter after that introduction is usually going to have 2 or 3 paragraphs. One of the things you'll notice if you use a chatbot to help you with this, a chatbot will give you like 5 or 6 body paragraphs. It's kind of insane. So you usually just want 2 or 3. They should be relatively short paragraphs. They should be topical paragraphs. So a general organizational scheme is often, after the introduction, the first body paragraph may discuss your technical skills, the hard skills that qualify you for this position. And then that may be followed by a paragraph that discusses your so-called soft skills. So that would include things like communication skills, teamwork skills, leadership skills, things that you may have gained from a variety of areas. And together, those 2 main categories of skills hopefully give a picture of you that shows that you are qualified for this role, whether or not you've previously worked in this field before. So as you are developing the body of your letter, on the one hand, you're probably conveying some information that is a bit similar to your resume, but you don't just want to copy and paste your resume because they can read your resume. What you want to do is make a strong connection between the things that you can do and the things that the job listing says they're seeking. And so sometimes that can even mean mentioning very mundane things that are requirements of the job posting, such as, I don't know, must have a driver's license. Sometimes you'll see that in some postings. And so this would be a place you could mention that potentially. It's also a place where you can make connections between things that may seem outside the realm of work, such as, personal interests, hobbies, involvement in things like scouting or organizations or class projects that are less formal experiences, but show that you learn things from those experiences that meet the kind of things the employer is looking for. So there should definitely be a connection in the letter between effectively the kind of stuff in your resume and the kind of stuff in the job listing. The letter allows you to sort of bridge that and show that you understand what they're seeking without saying, I know that you're looking for blank and I can do blank. You just say, I can do blank, because they know what they're looking for. So you don't have to tell them that they're looking for that. You just tell them what you can offer. So the body of the letter is relatively concise. You want to front load the most important information earlier on in the letter because you can't count on them reading the whole letter all the way through. And you want to make sure that everything you're adding is specific and supported with details. And then the conclusion of the letter is usually very formulaic and brief, kind of like the introduction in a way, in the sense that it just usually points the reader to your resume, indicates your interest in an interview, provides your contact info, even though they have your contact info other places. Why wouldn't you make it super obvious to, let them know that you prefer to be contacted by email and here's your email address? You can also let them know if you have any kind of limitations for contact, based on your schedule, like they can call you in the afternoon or whatever it may be. That would be a chance for you to do that. You do usually want to be pretty concise. One of the big problems I see with chatbot generated letters is they'll have like 3 concluding paragraphs that'll just go on and on and on in a repetitive fashion. So you just need to wrap things up. It's not a place where you need to sort of protract the experience. So you might reasonably wonder, kind of pulling this all together, what are some important considerations? The first and foremost consideration is that letters need to be individualized, more even than a resume. Because each introductory paragraph should have the specific position you're seeking, they should be individualized to that role. And more than that, they should be reflecting things that that specific employer is looking for. And while there are a lot of commonalities when you're looking for positions in a similar kind of work, there are also specific differences as well. There's things employers tell you about their corporate values or their organizational culture that you can integrate into your letter to kind of show you're on board with these things. You definitely want to make sure that everything about the letter is focused on what you have to offer, not what the employer can offer you. And that, again, is a big misstep I see in a lot of these communications, is they end up talking a lot about how the person writing the letter can be helped out. It's also a chance to reflect something of your unique personal voice and personality, which hopefully is, likable and reasonably friendly and articulate. And again, that's where using a chatbot can be a problem. Even though it can help you structure some information and generate ideas, if the letter that you send out is not your personal voice, it's going to become really apparent if you get an interview and it's like, you don't sound anything like this letter that they received. It causes people to question the authenticity of the material. So when you use your real personal voice in your letter, when you sound like you, it makes that letter feel all the more legitimate, authentic, that they can trust this is a real human being on the other side of this. And especially as we have more of these tools to help us with our job application materials to help them be more polished. And that's a good thing on the one hand, but then the only way you have to stand out from other people is your personal voice and your personal experiences. So everything that you have that is unique to you is what's going to make you stand out from the other people applying for the same position, maybe using the same tools to help generate their materials. So it's really important that you stand out in a positive way as an individual. So really quickly, the cover letter that's posted in the textbook is, in my opinion, not very good. So we're not going to look at it because I don't think there's anything to be gained from looking at a letter that's not very good, even to critique it. So what I would rather point you to is the sample letter that I have posted in Canvas. So the letter I have posted in Canvas illustrates the general sort of strategy that I was talking about on the previous slides. And I think it does a much more effective job of being convincing about a person's experience. So let me get that up on the screen. So this is actually based on it was a past student's letter from one of my previous semesters. And of course, I changed all the information. But it was a good letter, so I thought it was useful. So this particular letter, which I'll scroll down so you can see it fits on one page. Your letter should always fit on one page. Whether or not your resume is one page, your letter should always fit on one page. Your goal should be 2/3 to 3/4 of a page worth of material. And you'll see that it does use professional business letter format. Even though you are probably not going to put this in an envelope and mail it, having all of those details correct shows that you are a person who can do detail. So that's an important thing. This particular letter, you'll notice, is not addressed to a specific human being by name. And that is often the case. You don't know the name of a person. Sometimes you do. If you do know the name of a person, you address the letter to that person. But more often than not, you don't. And so the letter is addressed to the company, and you use an attention line to something like hiring manager, human resources department. Maybe use a subject line that is the position you're seeking and its position number. So something up there. It's not usually a salutation. You don't want to say to whom it may concern. It may be an attention line or a subject line, but it should help effectively route this communication, as it were. So that's, kind of just the framework around the letter. But you can see that the body of the letter itself is 4 paragraphs following that pattern that I was talking about earlier. We can see from looking at the introduction here, this person is looking for a front-end intern position at Coeducate that they found on Indeed. So that just, the opening sentence there just lets us know what they're going for. Then the next couple of sentences round out that introduction with some specific details. So as an internship position, this is often predicated on your status as a student. So this person makes her status clear. She's a junior at University of Houston, but then she has some things she's done that are relevant to this role. She talks about building web applications and some of the software tools that she used to do that. And then rather than talking about how this position can benefit her, she talks about being eager to use her skills to benefit the company. So as you can see, it's fairly short and simple, but using that kind of specific detail in the paragraph does definitely generate interest in the reader. This is someone who actually has something to offer. So then the second paragraph is their hard skills paragraph, and if that's the heart of the letter right there. And they focus on the different experiences they've had using specific details. Now, presumably, a lot of these things might be things that the listing for this internship stipulates that the person would be doing in this position. They might be using CSS and JavaScript. So what this person in the letter is talking about are these specific elements. It is an excellent example of using specific detail and how persuasive that makes a letter rather than using just sort of vague generalities, especially the kind of vagueness that you get when you just plug a job listing into a chatbot. These things are clearly specific to this person's own experiences, and that is something, again, that is going to hook the reader's interest, but also show that this is legitimate. Now, in the letter's third paragraph, they don't talk a whole lot about their soft skills. So if there was one thing I was going to criticize, it would probably be I would have liked to see maybe a little bit about their soft skills here. So what they've instead focused on is kind of their alignment with the company's values, which is a sort of soft skill, but I guess I would have liked to maybe see them talk about, maybe teamwork skills. Maybe they've been in group projects with programming and they're accustomed to working with a team. Communication skills, that could be useful. But I don't think this is a bad paragraph because they do show that they understand what Coeducate does, and they're showing that they have an interest in those goals and are in alignment with it. And then the conclusion, again, pretty brief, points the reader to the resume, invites them to contact her for an interview, and gives her email address as her preferred means of contact, because who wouldn't rather get an email than a phone call? So anyhow, that's what this letter is. This is a reasonable example of a persuasive job application cover letter, and this is posted in Canvas for your reference if you would like to view it as part of working on the upcoming job application materials project. So I think that's all I specifically wanted to say about the letter before we just kind of shift gears.